This little piece of glass is why camera lenses cost thousands of dollars. But here is the thing, learning how these lenses are manufactured completely changed how I look at the price of photography gear. It now kind of makes sense as to why this Sony lens cost more than my first car. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you're never gonna look at camera lenses the same way again. Let's get into the step-by-step process of building a lens, of creating a lens, so you can see it in a little bit more detail. Now, it all begins with a humble block of optical glass. Now, these aren't just random chunks of silica that you'd find at the beach. This glass is engineered to be as pure and as consistent as humanly possible. These blocks of glass often cost more per pound than silver. The glass comes as a pressed plate or sliced sheet, which is then cut into smaller chunks. Think of this as the rough draft to a novel. It's got some potential, but it's going to take a lot of work to get it over the finish line. Once these chunks are then prepared, they're handed over to a curve generator machine. And this sophisticated grinder works its magic to shape the glass into an initial convex or concave form. The precision here is jaw-dropping. We're talking tolerances that are imperceptible to the naked eye, yet critical to the final product's performance. Every piece is then inspected, and if it's not up to snuff, it's scrapped. No exceptions. Why does this matter? Well, because the shape of the glass directly affects how light bends and focuses through the lens. A badly shaped glass element is like handing over your camera to a drunk friend at a party. It's gonna mess up every single shot. And so getting this right from the start is key to sharp, insta-worthy pics that won't make your followers cringe. So by the end of this step, you're going to have a rough shape, but calling it a lens at this point is like calling a stick figure a masterpiece. The lens still needs to be well polished before it's ready for the spotlight. Next up, the lens goes through a grinding process, and this isn't your run-of-the-mill sanding. This is more like a spa treatment for the glass. The glass gets repeatedly ground down with finer and finer polishing particles in water. Each step is designed to refine the shape and remove any imperfections. And by the end of this process, the surface is polished to an optical smoothness measured in nanometers. That's thinner than a single strand of hair. And of course, a perfectly polished lens element means that your sunset shots are going to glow like a dream, not like they were taken through the bottom of a pot bottle. And I imagine you probably want those crisp edges, stunning colors, and zero weird flares, right? Well, this is where the groundwork is laid. But the real magic of modern lenses happens when they start coating them. Okay, so once the lens is polished, it's time for the lens to suit up, and coatings are applied to protect the glass, reduce reflections, and enhance light transmission. Now, these coatings aren't your average spray and let's go kind of deal. They're applied in vacuum chambers, the same technology that NASA uses when it's creating its spacecraft windows. And some coatings are only a few molecules thick, but they are game changers for image quality. Now, each lens surface is meticulously cleaned before the coating process begins. This cleaning removes any dust or oils that may compromise the coating effectiveness. The coatings themselves are made from materials like metal oxides and quartz, applied layer by layer in an environment so controlled that it genuinely makes a surgical operating room look sloppy. Now, different lens coatings do different things. Anti-reflective coatings, for example, increase the amount of light that passes through the lens by reducing the amount of light bouncing off the front and the back of the glass element. Additionally, some optical elements, such as the glass at either end of your camera lens, get up to a dozen layers of coatings, each one enhancing color accuracy, contrast, and overall clarity. But here is the amazing part. These coatings are not only invisible, but they're incredibly durable. They are like the sunscreen of the lens world, protecting against scratches and oxidation, whilst making sure that you can still shoot in all kinds of conditions. If your camera lens survives a dusty safari or a rainy mountaintop, then you've got these coatings to thank. So, with the glass polished and coated, it's time to give these lens elements a home. So let's look at how the barrel is made and assembled. Now comes the assembly stage. The lens elements are placed into a barrel, which is a fancy name for the chassis that holds everything together. And if you think building Lego is challenging, try designing a lens barrel that has to maintain perfect alignment of multiple glass elements whilst zooming, focusing, and surviving being dropped. And I've dropped a few lenses over the years, and they've all been pretty much fine on the back of it. Now, these barrels are engineered to precision tolerances and are often made from materials like aluminium, brass, or even high-tech engineering plastics. The goal with them is to protect the lens and keep everything perfectly aligned, no matter how many times you twist that focus ring, no matter how many bumps, knocks, scrapes, scratches that the barrel gets. The barrel also houses critical components like the diaphragm, the autofocus motors, and even all of the elements of weather sealing as well. I mean, the diaphragm, for instance, is made up of ultra-thin metal leaves that adjust the amount of light that are entering your camera. It's a marvel of miniaturized engineering, moving seamlessly as you change the settings in your camera. And for photographers, this step of creating the barrel, getting everything within it, and sealing it all up is what keeps your lens from becoming a fancy paperweight the first time you knock it, drop it, just even move it around. A well-built lens barrel means that you can take your lens from the icy peaks of Everest to the sweaty chaos of a music festival without missing a beat. And again, like the lens elements themselves, everything within the barrel is assembled with surgical precision. Heck, even the interior surfaces of most lens barrels are coated to minimize reflections and glare within the barrel itself. So the lens is now complete, but it's not ready to ship out to retailers just yet. What really drives up the cost of these lenses isn't just the manufacturing and also the research and development that goes into creating them in the first place. It's also the next step of the process. You've probably experienced the gut-wrenching feeling of buying something expensive and then having it break after the warranty has expired. Well, lens manufacturers are obsessed with making sure that that doesn't happen. To help with this, every single lens that gets manufactured from the top manufacturers goes through a battery of tests that would make an Olympic athlete nervous. Lens manufacturers test these lenses in conditions that would make your very, very worst ever photo shoot look like a walk in the park. They are checking for optical sharpness, working in freezing cold weathers, working in desert heat, drop tests, vibration tests, humidity tests, lens element centering tests. They even know how the lens is going to perform after thousands and thousands of focus adjustments back and forth over and over. It's like they send your lens to boot camp before you even get it. And it's not just physical testing either. Each lens gets put through optical testing that's so precise, it can even detect variations smaller than the wavelength of light. They use a tool called laser interferometers that can spot imperfections that your eyes could never see. It's like having a microscope that can see molecules, but very specifically for optical lens quality. And the really mind-blowing part, if a lens fails any of these tests, even by a small margin, it doesn't ship, it doesn't leave the factory. That is why when you buy a high-end camera lens, you're not just paying for the glass and the metal, you're paying for the peace of mind that comes from knowing that your lens is going to perform perfectly, whether you're shooting a wedding in the Sahara or wildlife in the Arctic. And speaking of perfection, let's talk about what happens when you add focusing motors to all of this mix and it becomes even more complicated. Now, do you remember the days of manual focus lenses? Well, neither do I. I've only ever shot digital cameras that have all had autofocus, but I've heard the stories. And you can think of today's autofocus systems like having tiny robots inside your lens all working together to keep your images sharp. And these aren't just any robots. These are precision instruments that move heavy pieces of glass with accuracy measured in micrometers. It is crazy. And high-end lenses use multiple motors, each optimized for different tasks. You've got ring-type ultrasonic motors that are faster than a hummingbird's wings. You've got stepping motors that are smoother than butter. And you've got linear motors that make your old point-and-shoot autofocus look like it's moving through mud. But here's what really blows my mind. These motors have got to be both powerful but precise. It'd be like trying to parallel park a tank with the precision of a surgical incision. That's what these motors do at sometimes hundreds of times a second for years, if not decades on end. And on top of all this, they've got to do it quietly, consistently, and smoothly over and over again. Then you've got the software that controls all of these motors, another hidden cost when you buy a camera lens. And each lens needs its own specialized programming to work with different camera bodies, and then each lens is obviously very different as well. I wouldn't underestimate the amount of time and research and development that goes into just the software that runs these lenses. And that's why modern camera lenses cost an arm and a leg. The technology inside them is crazy. And if you took a modern camera lens and body back even just 20 years, you would blow everybody's minds. We are absolutely so spoilt with the technology that us amateur photographers have access to at not all that crazy prices. And if you're an amateur photographer like me, so you're not making money from your hobby, none of this is actually mission critical, then No matter what any of these nerd YouTube camera reviewers tell you, most modern camera lenses are going to be plenty sharp for our use case. Do not get suckered into the marketing hype by both camera brands and all of these nerd YouTubers that review all this gear in their mum's basements, that you need the latest and greatest every single time. It honestly does not make much of a noticeable difference when you're comparing two images side by side at the end of the day. A shot of something spectacular with a cheaper f4 lens is going to be a much better photograph than a shot of something boring with a clinically sharp, professional f2.8 lens. The gear is most often not the differentiator between someone who is average at photography and someone who is exceptional. And if you would like to level up your actual photography skills so that you can take more awesome shots, then why not click the video that's on the screen right now.